Hello everyone and welcome to another amazing episode of Studio Crete, the show that explores arts and culture with a Cretan perspective. Today we're going to have Kelly teaching us about Cretan mythology, and then later on Paddy will be telling us about his experiences as a Laouto player. Enjoy the show!
Next, I'd like to discuss the mythology surrounding Zeus and Crete. It's said that Rhea, Zeus's mother, gave birth to him in Crete and that he was hidden and protected in a cave in Psiloriti. A group of 7 men known as the Cretes were taught the art of dance by Rhea, and what they would do is they would dance a war dance, which is thought to be a noyano, around the cave, banging their shields and their swords together in an effort to mask baby Zeus's crying, again in an effort to protect him. We've tried to recreate that story through our performance recently at Adipodes, in which we had a few of our students dress up as the Cretes and reenact that war dance that they danced to protect baby Zeus.
G'day guys, welcome to another episode of Studio Crete. My name's Manoli and I have Paddy Montgomery with me today. He's a very well-loved musician and member of the Cretan community and the folk music community at large throughout Melbourne. So Paddy, welcome to the show. How are you going?
Good, Manoli, Carlos Friga.
For those who are watching who might not know a lot about you, do you mind providing a little bit of an insight about yourself?
Sure, no problem at all. Well, a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Adelaide, South Australia. From before I could remember, Dad showed me some chords on the guitar, and I was a couple of years old and just started playing from a very, very young age, and it very quickly was just an obsession. Fast forward into school years, I was sort of listening to a lot of sort of Arabic music and Turkish music and a lot of Indian classical music, and I was really into all these other sounds that you'd say are non-Western, and certainly no countries that I'm really have any heritage from. I'm Australian, Irish, Scottish. Everyone Australian is half Irish, basically. But anyway, one day, and I was playing this. I bought a sazi, like tamburas, you say in Greece, and I was teaching myself some of this music and met some musicians. But one day I heard some music from Crete, and that heard the Laouto specifically, and that kind of changed absolutely everything. And that's the reason I'm here now, as we're talking about this. 17 years later, been playing this stuff now, so it's a really long time.
You can sometimes draw these invisible lines of what the ethnicity is. And it's easy for some people to compartmentalize it, like this is for this is for this. But it sounds like your experience with music broke down those barriers and just saw you pursue sounds that you found interesting and wanted to explore.
It's really special when something rocks the boat that much that you're like, I have to know where that comes from and what the reason is behind it. Because it's one thing to be able to articulate why you like certain types of music or whatever, but to know why it has an effect on you like that, particularly like the Cretan stuff did the first time I heard it. Like, if you've seen the movie Zorba the Greek, and, before I was getting into all this stuff, everyone was saying to me, like Greek music, I thought Greek music, well, I've heard Zorba the Greek, and I was like, but if you watch the movie Zorba the Greek, there's this one scene where you see these blokes walking up to the house, and one's holding a Laouto, and you hear this Laouto start playing, like Marco Yanni and Sifoyori playing Rodino. I heard this and just like, hairs on the back of the neck standing up. I was this lira. And I was like, that sounds like someone going crazy. That's better than any rock and roll I've ever heard. Like, it's amazing. And my dad came in, and he's I rewound the thing, and I said, look at this, listen to the sound of this thing. And he heard it and he said, that sounds awful. It's just like, no, I can't. He'll never understand this stuff. But I can't explain it. If you watch that movie again, you hear it. It broke down every barrier. And then when I started listening to that music, I was like, well, I don't know what they're singing about, but I've got to know, And
it touches on the idea that on one hand, music is kind of infinite, and there's so many ways you can explore it. But it also shows how unique our own personal tastes are. And I'm fascinated because all these different influences that you've spoken about, whether it's listening to Irish folk music or Indian folk music or Arabic folk music, well, a lot of those, we hear a lot of similarities between them, but there's also been a lot of cross-fertilization and collaboration between those, because as we know, Crete is a multicultural community and a multicultural history with influences from everywhere. So I think those elements and notes, it's unsurprising that in your journey of listening to all of these things kind of led you down the road of listening to a bit of Cretan music too.
My favorite example of this, and probably the most common one, is the song Tavasana Mujerome. It's a stunning, beautifully bittersweet kind of Amane style song. But you hear this, I have heard a version of this song played in Rebetika.
Yeah.
I've heard a version of this song played in Turkish folk music. I have heard a version of this song played in Egyptian folk bands, and you'll hear a version of that. There's the Armenians sing it.
Yeah.
If you listen to it, you'll say it's the exact same song, but it's just transcended, and and the Cretans have made it thoroughly Cretan as well, and it's just one of the finest versions of this melody. But then within Crete as well, you've got east to west, and then how unbelievably different it is. It's a wonderful Crete sounds like its geographical location, but also has this great kind of smorgasbord of its own music.
What's it been like more broadly learning about Cretan culture? Because you've spoken about touching on the geography and external influences, but from your perspective, what's been like learning about general Cretan culture?
Amazing. Where do I start with that, Manoli? Like that has potential for me to break out in tears if I think about how much hospitality I've experienced at the hands of Cretan people over the years. But I don't know if you've met my very dear friend in Adelaide, Stamati Boraki, is a wonderful man, Hanyotti, and his whole family are very cool. Well, when I first wanted to find a lute, and earlier that year, the reason I wanted to find a lute was because I found the CD of Yorgo Xiluri, Sara Yorgi, and that's the musician. He's still the biggest musician biggest influence on my musical life, I think, is, along with Ross Daly as well. That's what got me into it, and I said I have to find a Laouto. I must learn how to make this sound. But anyway, our friend Costa said, "Yeah, I know a guy. His name's Stamati. He's got an old critical Laouto. He might, want to help you out." And anyway, my dad, after school one day, I was in year 10 at the time in high school. My dad drove me over to their house, and my parents were very supportive with this whole thing. They really, knew important things were happening there and encouraged it. So Dad drove me over the other side of town, and we went round there, and out rocks Stamati. He's the deal, man. The full mustaki, and he's this man. I'm like, I don't feel like I want to take a musical instrument off this man, but out comes his son Manoli, and he said, and Manoli was translating for me, and he said, why do you want to learn the lute? And I said, I've been listening to Yorgo Xiluri and Tony Fragadaki, and he was like, oh, okay, well, here it is. And now I'm a left-handed player. I don't hold the instrument like most people do, but I hold it the other way.
Yeah.
And he gave me the lute, and I held it left-handed. And Stamati, το είδε και λέει, και το παιδί το πιάνει το όργανο ανάποδα. Δεν ξέρει πώς θα πιάσει το... è piaciuto organo από τα and then what I did was I tuned the strings and I managed to play just a few notes of I think it was O Sovarun Tasidera, because I've been listening like da 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 dun da 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 dun da 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 dun da 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 dun da, and σταμάτη με ξανήγε και πάρ' το όργανο
Oh,
για όσο καιρό χρειάζεται, like, όσα χρόνια θες για να
oh,
μάθεις. Να το προσέχεις το όργανο. And I'll tell you as well, what you didn't know was that Laouto is an antique fragedaki from the 70s, like
jeez.
an
Wow.
antique, like Saroyani says, Yaya Laouta. Like they don't make them like that anymore. But Stamati, and he said, look, you got to learn. And him and that whole family have been supported since day one.
Particularly about the Cretan music scene, I was wondering how you see the Laouto music scene or the Cretan music scene in Australia. What are your perspectives of the scene?
You know, since I moved here 10 years ago, there's been some friends of mine like George Raraki and Sifi Maraki and George Vardaki, who's come down from Sydney. You know, these guys are 5 years, 6, 7 years younger than me and stuff, and they're all playing just so great, and they all sound like where they're from. You know, Raraki, he is just such a Milopotamiti, you know, and he plays like one. You know, lute, mandolino, and ascobandura. You know, I couldn't. You know, if I'm a lute player, I'm a mandolin player, and you know, but I could never play. That's just in the blood. I don't think I'll ever be able to sound like that. I'll play those songs and that music to the best of my ability, but I'll never be able to sound like that, I don't think. But at the same time, up in Sydney as well, I went up. I've been up a couple of times to play, and there's some awesome young players there. There's who I've had the very good fortune to give a couple of lessons to. There's young Joanna Rakis, if you've seen her, she plays lira, and she's unstoppable. She is all systems go, and she learns very quickly, and she's not afraid to have it a go and sing. And then there's young Alexandro Budaki. Unreal, like the drive that these guys have. And then here in Melbourne, young Alexandro, he's playing lute and lira, and he's also built a couple of instruments. He's playing very well, and they're all getting together and playing. But then here in Melbourne, I've also got a young student here who you'll see playing around, young Pavlo Dunius.
Yeah.
You know him.
Yeah.
And this guy, I'm like, watch out. Again, you know, he has to keep doing what he's doing. He's not only very, very into Cretan, but he's really heavily into the stuff from his era, from Grevena, like Clarina, Viola, Epirotica, Dimotica.
Yeah.
You know, that stuff, Laouta, you know. But also next to Crete, he's into the Carpathiotica, the Dodeganisiaca, other Nisiotica, and he's just full into traditional. Like, you know, our mate Joey Tsombanopoulos has always been. And like myself, you know, he acknowledges that Greece is, he full respects how versatile Greece is. And, you know, you can get by just playing Cretan music as well, that's fine. But I like Greece. Greece has too much other good stuff going on. There's lots of great music, but but the Cretan will always be a little bit further in front. But back to the scene. Yeah, I think the scene here is really good. The one disadvantage we have here in Australia is being so far away. It is good to be there and play amongst pareas, but fortunately there are a lot more people playing these days, and they can get together and play a lot more, and that's what you need. but also being amongst it, is the most important thing. But I'd say we're the scene here is fantastic, and I'll tell you what, it's been really good for me for 10 years in Melbourne, and I've come up, I've been to so many of the Cretan conventions around the country, and each state has a great crew, and it's a wonderful thing.
What music pursuits do you like to follow? What are you exploring? Where do you think the next step for yourself is?
One of my main gigs is with a country singer, an Australian. She's a bit of a star at the moment. She's an Australian country singer named Fanny Lumsden, and she won an ARIA award last year, and a whole bunch of Golden Guitar Awards from Tamworth, and I tour quite a number of months of the year round with her, and it's Australiana. Playing electric guitar and acoustic guitar and mandolin. Looks like next year I'll get back into playing with this wonderfully talented songwriter, an Irish guy by the name of Gally. He's a Dubliner. He's a really, really brilliant songwriter, and hoping to get back to playing with him next year, and a few other awesome American bluegrass music with my friend Dan Watkins. And I also have another band called Omados with Joey Tsombanopoulos, Katerina Stevens, and George Athanasakos. But we play sort of διαφορετικά παραδοσιακά, like a lot of Thraki, Ipiro, Nishotika, not much Cretan, but Katerina has just learned to pentuzali. I showed her how to play a pentuzali the other day, and she sent it back to me the other day, like a voice memo, and I sent it to Sifi to like I forwarded it, and I didn't tell her that, and he was like, "What, man, bravo!" But in that band we play a lot of other sort of paradosiaka, and I have one other band as well, which I'm recording an album for, which is also more paradosiaka, but really hardcore kind of politica, Anatoliki Thraki, like a lot of really quite, and it's with a very dear colleague of mine, Lambros Kapas, who's he's like a musical historian. He digs up old pieces, and he pesi uti.
Yeah. It's awesome. Paddy, to let you go, I can't help but ask, what's the most Cretan thing in your house?
I used to have, I don't have it anymore. I used to have a vinyl copy, vinylio record of Skordalo, o Christos Discos, to Skordalo.
Oh, what?
But probably one of the sariki. I've got a sariki in my loot case from Lefkoya in southern Rhemno, like really way down south. Lefkoya. I've got a Mavro sariki that stays in my loot case all the time, and that was given to me by the first lira player I ever played with. He lived in Adelaide for about 18 months.
Yeah.
And he was from Lefkoya, and he studied in Australia, and his yaya made that for me. And many years later, after that, a couple of years later, I went to Crete, and we went to his chorio, and I met his family, and I'd learned to play a lot of the music from him, and his yaya gave me this black sariki, and it's always stayed in my in the fichi de Laouto.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and talking about your art. Before we let you go, did you have any message for the people at home watching?
All of you, if who are watching this channel, I presume because you also love to promote and support Cretan music and culture. Πρέπει να κρατήσουν αυτή την παράδοση και να συνεχίζουν να παίξουν και να τραγουδούν κρητικά τραγούδια και μαθηνάτες.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paddy. A very important message, and I'm sure one that a lot of people are going to take home with them. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
Pleasure is all mine, Manoli. Να σας πάτε καλά.
And that concludes another episode of Studio Crete. If you loved what you saw, please feel free to like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out our website. Thanks for joining us on Studio Crete.